Hey, how's it going? My name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to be discussing all of the books that I've DNF'd in the year of 2021. And let me tell you, it's been a lot. Some of them you know about, some of them you don't. In the year of 2021, I feel like I've grown more comfortable than I ever have with DNFing books, because reading books is supposed to be an enjoyable thing for us, you know? So if you're not enjoying it and you're like 50% of the way through the book, or even less than that, why continue to read if it's starting to feel a little bit more like torture than fun? So because of that, I have quite a lengthy list of all of the books that I've DNF'd this year. But before we jump into all of those books that I've DNF'd, I have to give a huge thank you to Pango Books for sponsoring today's video. And I feel like Pango Books is the perfect app and online website for book nerds such as ourselves. I just assume, you know, if you're watching this, that you're kind of a book nerd like me. And this app and this website is so cool for book nerds if you're looking to buy books at a cheaper price, or if you're looking to sell your books, because anybody can sell their books on Pango and it's a super easy and quick process. You just have to take a picture of the book, scan the barcode, add in a few little extra details, and then when the book sells, they send you a little prepaid USPS shipping label to make it easier on you. And I found that the app is the easiest way to use Pango Books. It is available on iOS and on Android. Signing up is the most simple thing and it's free to do. And when you sign up, they have you choose between a bunch of different hashtags, and the hashtags help narrow down your specific taste in books. So you can select from like different genres like horror and, you know, like new releases. You can select a bunch of different things like that. And then once you've sorted through all the hashtags you want to add, it'll take you to your main feed, which at the top of your feed, it's going to have picks for you this week. Like that's what it shows on there. And this whole list at the top is just a bunch of books that they think that you would enjoy based off the hashtags that you just chose. They also have the second listing is going to be new listings that you may like. So these are going to be new books that are just going up for sale. They want you to be the first to know, the first to see it if it's something you enjoy. I also love that you can scroll down and see that they have different genres listed, and if you click see all, you can scroll through like so many different genres. Of course, I went straight for the horror fiction because I'm super intrigued by what kind of horror books people are selling on here. And I was really surprised actually to see that there's a lot of horror books that I'm interested in on here, and there's a lot of like different Stephen King with like some of the classic covers that are harder to find. They're on here, so like that's pretty freaking awesome. I also love that you can follow other people on Pango Books because one of my friends, Jessie, over from Bowties and Books, you might have seen that they did a video with Pango Books earlier this year, and they are also selling books on Pango Books. And so if they ever are unhauling books that I'm interested in, I'm definitely going to be following them to see, because the prices are just so good on here and it's way better than buying a new book at full price. I'm a huge supporter in buying books used because I think used books need a home, and honestly it's a lot more affordable to just purchase used books from other book nerds as opposed to going somewhere and buying books full price. Yeah, check out the link in my description to go and download Pango Books, and you can also use my code Gabby5 to get a $5 credit towards your next purchase on Pango, which, like, how cool is that? Not only do you get the book discounted, but you also get the $5 credit, so it's even less money for you. And yeah, you can follow me on Pango Books if you'd like to. My username is gabbyreads, so you can find me over there. How exciting. Thank you so much to Pango Books for sponsoring today's video and for just being a really cool place for book lovers like myself. And yeah, now, without any further ado, let's get into all the books that I've DNF'd this year, because it's excessive. So the first books that I want to mention on this list are going to be some of the ones that hurt me the most, and some of the ones that you might already know about, because the first one on this list is going to be The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix, and this one hurt my soul because I love Grady Hendrix in horror books. I adore most of his books, but for some reason this one was just so boring and it didn't end up working out for me. I think I've discovered about my reading taste is that I don't really like slashers very much, because not only did I DNF this book this year, but I also DNF'd Camp Slaughter, which was another horror that I was pretty excited about, but that one's also kind of a slasher. And as much as I love slashers in movies, for some reason in books, they just tend to bore me a little bit. So sadly, these two didn't end up working out for me. I also DNF'd My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones, and this one's kind of a slasher as well. I mean, in this book, we're following this young girl named Jade who feels like she's the main character in a slasher movie. And so there's definitely like a lot of slasher references in this and a lot of, you know, slasher vibes, I guess. But this one was also just really boring and really slow for me. And I I don't know. I found myself really bored. I couldn't get through it. I ended up DNFing this one at like 250 pages in, I think. I also ended up DNFing Dune this year, which I'm really sad about this one. I got 130 pages into it before I DNF'd it, and this book is massive, by the way. This book, I'm really sad that I DNF'd it for very shallow reasons. It's very shallow because I'm obsessed with this copy of this book. I think this is one of the most aesthetically beautiful books that I have on my bookshelf, and I'm never getting rid of it. Like, I'm just not getting rid of it because I think it's so beautiful. Like, I don't even care. It'll just sit pretty on my shelves forever, you know? But I'm sad that I didn't like this one because I really wanted to, but I also just had a feeling that this wouldn't be my thing when I started it. You know, I actually started reading this as part of a reading books outside of my comfort zone kind of video that never ended up happening because I was DNFing everything left and right. I mean, maybe one day, you know? Maybe one day, but that day is not today, so I DNF'd it. I also ended up DNFing one of my most anticipated books of 2022. And that was A Flicker in the Dark, which this one honestly kills me a little inside because this book is one of my most anticipated books of next year. It comes out in January, and it was actually a book of the month pick too for the month of December, so like, I just wanted to love it so bad, you know? Because this sounded like a thriller that was going to be absolutely everything because, you know, the girl, it's following this woman. Her dad was a serial killer back in the day, and then he went to prison for killing all these young girls, and now young girls are starting to die again, and she doesn't know who's responsible this time. But unfortunately, I just did not vibe with this writing style, like, at all. I only got, like, 50 or 60 pages in. It was like, I immediately predicted the plot twist, like, I could see where this was going, and, you know, this is a debut thriller, so maybe I shouldn't have had my expectations as high as they were, but unfortunately I thought it was so predictable. Like, honestly, it's just really predictable, and I just wasn't a huge fan of the writing. It just felt very easy to read, but in a way that's like almost like too easy to read. Like, there was no, I don't know what I'm trying to say. It was just very bland, I guess. The writing was bland. I also just recently talked about this in my video of trying to read the top 10 horror Goodreads Choice Awards this year, but I also DNF'd Summer Suns in that video because, my god, that book was just so boring and it was so repetitive. It was a lot of, you know, boys fighting, boys racing in cars. I don't care about cars. Like, car races, I could literally care less. Like, I have not seen any Fast and Furious movies because I do not care about car chases. I also, earlier this year, I DNF'd the book Dream Girl, and this is one that I was kind of excited about, but to be honest, I think I only got like 50 pages or less into this one before I was just like, no. It was just not my thing. It was so slow, so boring. And then I DNF'd the book that weekend. I DNF'd this during Camp Weekend Ween, which was such a bummer, you know, because I really wanted to love this book because I thought it would fit perfectly into the theme of Camp Weekend Ween, you know, because it was like called That Weekend. This one was also just one of those books that was like really boring and I just didn't really care. And honestly, this is kind of my fault because young adult thrillers usually are not my thing, so like I shouldn't have had any expectations going into this, but I think the reason why I was pretty excited about this one is because this author previously wrote that book The Cheerleaders, and I really loved The Cheerleaders, and so I was just expecting that I would love this one too, but that was not the case. And then I DNF'd the book Animal. This was actually one that I listened to on audio because freaking Emma Roberts narrates the audiobook, and so I was really excited about that. And this author also had a previous book that I really enjoyed, so I just thought that this was going to be like my new favorite thing, and it was just kind of mundane and very boring, and like nothing happens in this book. I honestly would have pushed through just because I love listening to Emma Roberts' voice, but I was just too bored. I just didn't care. I didn't want to get in a reading slump, you know? I feel like half the time that's like the main reason why I end up DNFing a lot of books is because I don't want to fall into a reading slump. That is like my worst, like I want to avoid it at all costs. I want to read because I love to read, you know, I don't want to torture myself. And then another book that I only got about 50 pages into before I DNF'd is The Neighbor's Secret. This was a book of the month selection this year that was like a thriller. I was really excited about it, but it ended up feeling so boring at the beginning of this, and there were so many characters and my brain was like, what, who, when, where, I don't know. I couldn't follow it very easily, and it's just not getting the best reviews, so I just don't feel like it's worth my time, honestly. And then I also DNF'd the book Where the Truth Lies. This one also kind of hurt, but I DNF'd it for like the same reasons. I got about 50 or 60 or maybe even 70 pages into this one. There were so many characters. It was so boring. I was so confused. And trying to keep track of like that many characters in a book, it's just difficult sometimes. Like my brain can't always handle that. So I DNF'd this one. I don't know if this one's a permanent DNF, but it's a DNF for now. I also DNF'd Never Saw Me Coming, and this one hurts because I thought this one had the potential. It had all of the potential to be a 5-star book for me. This one just ended up being so disappointing, and I don't even know what it was about it that was disappointing. It just wasn't what I wanted it to be. I remember like looking down at the audiobook and being like, God, I'm like 60% of the way through the book and I'm just so bored and like nothing's really happening in this story. Another book with some wasted potential could have been really great. And then I ended up DNFing Night Bitch, which this is one that this book is just so strange, you know? I feel like the concept, I like love the idea of the concept, but then the actual execution of it was just very strange, and I just don't know how I feel about this. But I do know that I just didn't care enough to finish it, you know? But this book is like, it's basically about this woman who thinks she's turning into a dog. And I know that this book, it's already getting like a movie adaptation, I'm pretty sure, with Amy Adams as the lead. At least that's what I've last heard. I don't know if that's still true. But like, what the heck, it just sounds like it would be really cool, but then it was just kind of confusing, to be honest, and kind of weird and strange and hard to follow, and I don't know. And then another book that I ended up DNFing this year is The Other Me. This is one that I was really excited about because it dealt with this woman, I think it was like alternate, it was supposed to be like alternate universes or something, or like if she made a different decision, we get to see the, you know, different decision played out in an alternate universe. And if you know my reading taste, that's one of my favorite things in books. Like, I absolutely love reading about alternate universes and things like that. But this book, oh my God, I got like, I think like 60% of the way through this audiobook and I was like, this is so boring. Like, nothing's even happening. And I'm sorry that I'm so repetitive with saying that every book's boring, but like, that is the main number one reason why I DNF books, if they're boring. And same with Yes Daddy, unfortunately. I think I only got like maybe 30 to 40% of the way into this one, but I also found this one to be really boring, and I'm sad about it because this one is a gay thriller that I was so excited to read. Like, I was just so freaking pumped. But then I didn't really like the main character very much. Like, he was just fine, and then I just couldn't get invested in anything that was happening in this. Then super early on in this year, in like I think March, I did this video where I was like reading books that were like horror books that had to do with water. And in that video, I ended up DNFing 2 books in that video. I DNF'd The Chill by Scott Carson, and this is one that I was sad about because I was obsessed with the cover that I bought on this book. Like, I literally bought this book at Barnes & Noble because of the cover. And this one just ended up being super, like, slow. Like, oh my God, so slow. And I just, like, didn't care. I really didn't like the way that this one is written. And then I also DNF'd in that video The Hollow Places. This is one that I was actually kind of surprised that I ended up DNFing because I've seen a lot of my friends really enjoy this one. And I assumed that I would love it, but it was just like not my thing. Like, I don't know, it kind of had like a fantasy element to it as well, if I remember correctly. I just was not into it, even though I did picture, I just remember about reading this book is that I pictured the main characters as David and Stevie from Schitt's Creek, because that was around the time where I was binge watching Schitt's Creek, and so I do remember that, and that was pretty great, but otherwise, it was a DNF. And then I also DNF'd that one book, Every Last Fear, this year because it was like slightly problematic and I just wasn't a fan, because this is one where I was like actually really excited to read this one. Like, it was actually a booktube book club pick for the month of March, and then some people were messaging me saying that it was really problematic and had really shitty representation of the Mexican characters in that book, and I was like, yikes, I don't want to be like, you know, promoting a book that has some problematic things in it. So I ended up pulling it as a book club pick, but then I wanted to read the book anyways on my own just to, you know, make my own opinion on it, and I just was not, I was not a fan of the way that this author wrote the Mexican characters in this book. Like, it's just very subtle, that kind of like, you know, they would call the Mexican characters the Mexicans, and just like some of the way that he went about writing the Mexican characters, it just didn't sit well with me. I mean, if you didn't know, my grandma was full Mexican. I'm 25% Mexican. I'm a quarter, okay? And it didn't feel good, you know? It just wasn't great to read about. And then from what I heard, because I ended up DNFing this book around like 50 to 100 pages in, but from what I heard about the ending, you know, all these characters are white that we're following in this book, and of course, towards the end of this book, they go to Mexico, and they just describe Mexico as this like dirty place, and they describe everyone there as like looking like they're criminals, and I just, no, thank you. So I ended up DNFing that one because it just felt a little bit problematic, and like it was not going to be fun to read. And then I DNF'd the book When the Stars Go Dark. I've actually tried to read this book like 3 separate times during this year. I don't know what it is about this book, but every time that I read it, I can't get past the 30% mark without feeling like I'm bored out of my freaking mind. And I don't know, maybe it's because of the fact that, we're following a detective point of view in this book, which isn't usually my thing. And then also this author has only previously written, I think, like historical fiction. Like this is her first kind of like mystery thriller book. So maybe it's just because of that. Like I just do not vibe with the writing style. I don't know, but I wanted to love this book so badly that I gave it 3 separate chances and I just can't. I just can't get into it. And then same goes for that romance book, Well Met. I've tried to read this 2 separate times, and both times I can't get past the 40% mark, and I don't know if it's just because I'm not a huge fan of reading about like Renaissance fairs and like cosplaying and things like that. Like I just don't care enough to want to read the book, even though I did think the romance was like pretty cute while I was reading it. I just don't care enough to read a book all about that, And then the next one might hurt a little bit for you, maybe, because I DNF'd The Green Mile by Stephen King. I know I was just talking about how everybody loves The Green Mile and like that's why I needed to read it and stuff, but I actually only listened to the first 20% of the audiobook before I decided that I was like kind of bored out of my mind. And like the way that Stephen King writes his male characters sometimes, he just writes them in a way that's like really freaking obnoxious. Like I can't even tell you the amount of times that this guy mentioned his crotch in that first 20% of the book. Like I don't want to read and listen to this old dude talking about his crotch that many times. It's just, Stephen King is so like hit or miss for me with his older books, and sometimes I can get past it and sometimes I can't. So I don't know if this is like a forever DNF, but as of right now, it's a DNF. Like I just couldn't do it. I know you're probably going to tell me to push past the first 20% and that it gets better, and you might be right, but as of right now, I just, no. And then the last book on this list, that's another like probably temporary DNF, is Grave Reservations. I mentioned this one in my November wrap up because I got about 60 pages into it, and then this time I originally read 60 pages with my eyeballs and I was like, this is really great, but I'm gonna wait for the audiobook so that I can like listen along with the audiobook and follow along, because that's like my preferred way of reading now, like let's be honest. And so then I finally was able to get the audiobook from my library, and when I started the audiobook, I was just not a fan of the way that this audiobook narrator narrates the detective character in this book. The detective's not the main character, but he's like the side main character, because our main character is Lita, who is this like psychic, but then the detective wants her to help him solve cases, and so they're kind of like a duo in this book. But I was just like, I do not like the way that this narrator is narrating the detective. Like she just made him sound so old and boring, and like I just didn't like, I don't know, there was just something about it that I just really did not like, so I ended up DNFing it because of the audiobook. So I think if I do pick up this book again in the future, it's probably just going to be me reading it physically. I just really didn't like the audiobook, and like that's so rare that happens to me, where I really don't like the audiobook like so much to the point where I shut it off and cannot listen to it because it drives me nuts. Like I think that's only happened to me maybe like 3 or 4 times ever that I've listened to an audiobook. Like most audiobooks I think are fantastic, but every now and then there's just something that really grates on my nerves about a certain way that a narrator narrates things, and this just happened to be one of those times. So that's unfortunate. But yeah, those are all of the books that I DNF'd this year. I actually, I didn't mention it here, but I did, I had this video planned in the month of August that I was gonna do, like reading some space horror books. Unfortunately for that video, it got canceled because I ended up DNFing the first 2 books that I attempted to read for that. But I'm kind of thinking that just might be me at that time. Like I just wasn't in the mood for that, and I was just trying to read it because that's what I had scheduled for that month. So I'm hoping, I'm not mentioning them here because I would still like to do that video at some point next year, maybe, hopefully. So I don't want to spoil which books they were for that video. But also, if you know of any really great space horror that you think I would really enjoy that I wouldn't DNF, I mean, who knows at this point, I just DNF things left and right, but if you know of any really good space horror books, I would love to know, so that I could reorganize and replan that video for next year. But yeah, these are all of the books that I have DNF'd in the year of 2021. I told you it was going to be a lot, that we would be here for a while. But yeah, I think DNFing books is very healthy. I don't know how, like, I know some readers that they will finish every single book that they start. And honestly, I respect it. Like, I respect it a whole lot, but also I can never. Because reading is, like, supposed to be fun for me. Like, I am very competitive with myself, but I'm not so competitive to the point that I will make myself unhappy by trying to finish a book that I'm not enjoying. I mean, it is a total bummer when you spend like full price on a new book and then you end up not enjoying it and DNFing it. Like, that is a huge bummer. But also, reading is meant to be fun, you know, and if you're not having fun, then what the heck? Just scrap it. Let me know if any of the books on this list, if you also DNF'd any of these books. Let me know if you think I should finish any of these books, like they get better maybe, and that you think I would actually really enjoy them. I don't think that would be the case, probably, but you know, you never know. And let me know which books you DNF'd this year that you're the most bummed about. So yeah, let me know all of your thoughts, and I will see you very soon with another video. Bye.